Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the recent security challenges vis-a-vis extremism. Also, we've seen over time vis-a-vis TTP, TLP that have increased, and overall the situation as far as the NSC's approval of Pakistan's first ever national security policy is concerned, linking it to the economy. We'll be talking about that. We'll also be talking about the geostrategic position, changing geostrategic position as far as Afghanistan, particularly with regard to that, and the challenges Pakistan faces from extremism. Also, we saw religious intolerance, all of those things. As a society, the kind of challenges that we are facing at this time, overall, the fabric of society, and the way that things have, unfortunately it seems, the challenges have increased in the year, from the year 2021 to now, the start of 2022. All of that today on Perspective. I have with me today Tughra Ali Amin, who's a senior analyst. Thank you for joining us today. Sarfaraz Ahmed Rana, who's a security analyst. Thank you for being with us today. Brigadier retired Shahid Jagir, who's a defense analyst. Thank you for being with us. Lieutenant General retired Lodi, Naeem Khalid Lodi, who's a former National Security Advisor. Thank you for joining us today. Dr. Saab, like we were earlier talking about, unfortunately, we've seen an increase as far as militant attacks are concerned from the previous year overall in 2021. I want to particularly talk about what you attribute this, as far as the TTP is concerned, the TLP is concerned, the threat Pakistan faces as a whole, from also the changing situation in Afghanistan, the way that the Americans left, what the situation is now. Of course, we've been pleading the case of the Afghans to the world, the humanitarian crisis and all of that. But overall, in terms of the security situation in Pakistan, how do you see it?
Well, first of all, I'll start with what happened in Afghanistan. There was a massive withdrawal of the US troops from that place, and yes, it fell to the Taliban. We felt happy for the moment, but it has very serious repercussions, because I think somehow it is felt that perhaps the people in our country think that they can also change the government like that, whatever happened in Afghanistan.
Okay.
But Afghanistan was a different ball game altogether. You see, there was a puppet government, there was a stooge government, very corrupt government, which was financed by foreign countries.
Of course, and the American presence there.
The American presence was not liked by the people. But this gave a fillip to Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. Then there was our government, actually through the Taliban in Afghanistan, were able to strike a peace deal with the Pakistani Taliban, which lasted only 1 month. So I think very wrong signals have been sent to them.
Okay. You're saying that the overall perception, unfortunately,
it has changed. The people think, the extremist forces think that they can change the governments because of what has happened in Afghanistan.
Okay.
So that is something which is worrisome. That should the state should be very clear in its mind that they are not going to tolerate any kind of mischief.
I think the state,
and they should come down very heavily on people, or people who are actually talking against the state, and they should not be tolerated. I mean, you start tolerating these people, you give an inch, they'll take a yard. So in this year, 2022, I think a very clear message from the state should go that, look here, we are not going to tolerate you if you are not going to
fair enough. Let me come back
the
to
writ of the state. And things like what happened in APS in 2014 should not be repeated.
Of
I think that was one of the worst.
I don't think there are two opinions on that.
Yeah, so this thing shouldn't happen again.
Right. Sarfaraz Saab, do you agree with what Yamin Saab is saying? He's, of course, as far as, do you think the perception itself, there's a wrong perception in terms of that's coming from across the border? It's given a sense of perhaps some false ray of hope to the extremist forces. Do you think that's contributed, which is what Yamin Saab is saying?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you just try to see that Pakistan is one of those countries in which Pakistan has paid a heavy price fighting the war on terror, and we have lost many precious lives. More than 80,000 people have been died in this war on terror. So I don't think so Pakistan can go back again, and and Pakistan, the state of Pakistan, of course, has to take a very clear position. And Pakistan, as Yamin Saab has clearly said, that Pakistan has to send a clear signal that if something bad happened, so definitely Pakistan is not going to tolerate. And I mean, Pakistan has no choice, but Pakistan has to take a very clear position and clear stance.
You don't, okay, let me go to Brigadier Shahid Jagir ji. Shahid Saab, do you think that, I mean, overall, as far as our position as a state is concerned, don't you think that we've been very clear as far as, for the extremist forces are concerned, the signals that we've sent? How do you view it? Because, of course, what happened, the APS is also very fresh in our minds. And the way that we have reacted overall as a society, as the military, the governments, successive governments to that, has don't you think it's been consistent?
Thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think we have to see Afghanistan in a bigger perspective. One, that it's our neighboring country, which has been, in turmoil from last, I would say, 40 years, and all the international players have been, putting in their bid for control of Afghanistan, and the ultimate sufferer of all this has been Pakistan. One the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which did the incident of APS. We know they have been sponsored by RAW, Afghan National Agency, National Security Agency, and others, power players, and the tested our resolve. The nation stood up very well, but I would say that the end state has not reached. We need to make every effort that they should be brought to justice. Government has initiated a dialogue, which is on one side is a good comment, because every war and every for that you have to come to the table. But that negotiation, in my personal perspective, we should not do it from our end.
Brigadier Saab, I will come back to you. I think there's a slight problem with audio. I will come back to you. Ji, General Saab, Naeem Khalid Lodi Saab, overall, as far as the security situation, of course, I mean, generally what Brigadier Shahid was saying as far as Afghanistan is concerned, and the fact that we have been the ultimate sufferers, even though we continue to speak for the plight of the Afghans. Even today, the way the Prime Minister has taken up the cause of Afghanistan in terms of the humanitarian crisis there. Of course, we know all of that. But overall, in terms of the geostrategic position, we really don't seem to have a choice. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, of course, because we are like, Shahid Saab is saying, it's across the border, the spillover effect, all of those things are very real for us.
True. Thank you very much. First of all, I agree with my brother that they have painted the scenario that what is happening and what implications it can have for Pakistan. From the Afghanistan side, our problems are multiple in nature. Not only TTP, it is also Daesh, it is also ISIK, it is also the lack of political stability. It is also total near collapse economy of Afghanistan, because all this is going to have a spillover effect on us, because already we are looking after so many refugees, and more refugees can come if the situation prevails like this. Now, taking them one by one, as far as Pakistan is trying its best to tell the world that they should come to the rescue of Afghan regime, Afghan people. But America and their allies, they would never do that. They are waiting for the collapse of this present regime. They are not interested in the people of Afghanistan, as most of us think, that they will come for the rescue. They've never done that, neither in Yemen or in Syria. This is their history. A problem is that China and Russia, who should have filled the vacuum, who should have come forward and do something about Afghanistan, they are also feeling reluctant. What are the reasons? I mean, we will not discuss here because we are focusing on Pakistan. About Pakistan, I must say one thing, that Pakistan has been through much graver situations than the one which is today, as far as our internal things are concerned. You know, the entire FATA was under the control of terrorists. Portions of some settled areas were under their control. Swat was under their control. And then we, cleared all this area. So today the situation is bad. I agree to, but it is not as grave as it was. So saying that it will be going back to zero and the same thing will happen, I think that is a bit exaggeration of the situation. Yes.
Do you agree that the perception that's coming from across the border is largely responsible for this, or at least in part responsible to this increase in extremism that we've seen recently?
True. I mean, that is a natural, you can say, spillover of whatever has happened there. And also, so far, there are certain factions within Afghan Taliban who are not very friendly to Pakistan. And you are hearing and watching whatever they are doing with our fence and all that. But this is a smaller problem. The larger problem is the one which you just indicated, what Dr. Tughril was saying, that its impact on our extremist outfits. But these outfits, whether it is TLP or other, splinters of TTP, today they are not as strong as we have faced, as I already said. Because
in your opinion, what is the solution? I want to come to that. What are some of the measures that we can take now towards dealing with this? One of them, of course, I want to talk about the national security policy also, and the way, that it's been linked to the economy and the effects of that, what the government perceives will happen. Let me come back to you. I'm going to go to Yameen Saabji. Yameen Saab, overall, how do you see this move? This move to integrate the security policy in terms of, in the light of the economics and the economy, and also, facing internal challenges both. I mean, in a sense, it's a coherent move, right, by the government.
Marukh Sahaba, I do not know the exact contours of the national security policy. What has been reported in the press is that it will not be a military alone thing, which is a very good thing. Human security matters, food security matters, economy matters. If your economy is in tatters, the nuclear bomb cannot save you. That's a fact.
Right.
So we cannot depend on the military strength alone. The military deterrence alone cannot save you from your internal problems. But I cannot comment on it because
overall, in terms of, I understand that.
Yeah, overall, number one, there ought to be a very clear-cut Afghan policy. We are now focused on a single-point agenda, that is to save the Taliban regime in Afghanistan, which is very good. I do not want that regime to collapse, because if it collapses, the results would be horrific. Already there has been a trickle of refugees coming in. I know it because here in Islamabad there is a small trickle of refugees which is coming. If the Taliban regime collapses, if the Americans and other countries, rich countries with deep pockets, are not willing to invest in Afghanistan or to unfreeze their accounts, it will be a grave problem. The Taliban of their own accord say that we are perhaps not more than 100,000 in number. Other people tell me that they are not more than 20 to 30,000 from the foot soldier to the general. So they are small in number. For them to control Afghanistan is difficult. Afghanistan not only has terrorists from TTP, ISK, they also have terrorists from Balochistan. The Braz is there. So this is very threatening for Pakistan, because they have not stopped their activities in Afghanistan, which is in Balochistan, which is Pakistan's soft underbelly. So Pakistan needs to be very clear to the Afghans, or at least we should also have policies to prevent any negative fallout in Pakistan because of what is happening in
Okay,
Afghanistan.
let me come back to you. Ji, Sarfaraz Sahab, don't you think we do have policies to prevent the negative fallout, the kind of policies that we can realistically have at this point? What about the hope that, of course we started with, like, Toghrul Sahab is also saying that there was a hope attributed to the Taliban, and the fact that this is a different Taliban from the old Taliban, that school of thought. Do you think that's slowly now giving rise to a certain kind of realism, that perhaps things are not as there are elements within the Taliban that there is this discord within Taliban which is not letting those kind of progressive forces come out, or their own narrative come out?
First of all, I would like to comment on there are certain things that on Pakistan's behalf, that there is a very positive and healthy realization on Pakistan's foreign policy, and the foreign policy experts of Pakistan and also the practitioners and foreign office realize that now we have to shift our priorities from strategic from geoeconomics. So now Pakistan has been focusing on geoeconomics, and definitely. And the most important thing is that the recent OIC session which took place in Pakistan, and there are many countries, including Saudi Arabia and some other countries, that they have committed some aid and some other political commitments towards Afghanistan to stabilize the government in Afghanistan, because Pakistan have realized that if that regime or Taliban collapse, so there will be definitely a massive repercussions or implication for Pakistan. So definitely, but on the same time, we also have to see that Pakistan also have limits, because Pakistan's own economy is not in a very good shape, and Pakistan's politics at the moment, we have see a polarization of, in Pakistan's political system, and also there is a rise of radicalization in Pakistan. Pakistan is on the grey list of FATF. So Pakistan has its own problems.
Why do you think so? I mean, other than, of course, the Afghan factor, the Afghanistan factor, so to speak, what is behind this increase, other than that, in extremism, in your opinion?
I think, the spillover effects, of course, there are certain ideological reasons we had seen. That of course in Pakistan we see the revival of radicalization, a new move in Pakistan, that the rise of TLP. I would say that there are certain state policies also that that have contributed towards that growth of the radicalization tendencies. So that also has a factor, and also the very dangerous comment which was made by the information minister of Fawad Chaudhry, in which he said.
Let me just come back to you. I'm going to go to Brigadier Shahid Jaagir Ji. Brigadier Sahab, overall, as far as our policies are concerned, overall, in what direction do you see them in terms of this issue of extremism is concerned? Because clearly, how do you see it? Do you think that the state has adopted a clear narrative against extremism? Because we've seen the Prime Minister come out, talk about religious intolerance. We've seen him come out and say again and again, we saw what happened, although that is a different kind of religious extremism, but intolerance, so to speak. But we saw what happened in terms of, the Sialkot incident recently also. What's your take on that?
Look, I would divide this question into three parts. Number one is the uneducation, rising bulge of unemployed, uneducated youth in the country. Number two is the real essence of Islam. We read thousands of books, but we don't read the Quran in our own language. That is why we are dependent on the Maulvis. Even for our death rituals and birth rituals, we have to call him, because we don't know. Whereas Islam does not say about that. Now, if our elite, especially, and the upper middle class and the upper class understand the teachings of the Quran, which is there in that, I think half of the problem will be solved. When we will be dependent on a prayer leader who is educated in a particular subject, which is written by Ahmad Sirhandi, and we are following that, this issue is not going to resolve. The second thing is the tolerance in the society. The tolerance in the society is again multi-factor. People are poor. There is low, I would say, no law and order in the country. The laws are made but not implemented in this country. The law is only for the one who cannot break it. So these are the things which need to be addressed if we need to promote the tolerance, civism. Civism is not only in religious affairs. Go to any mall, to the big hotel in Islamabad. The people are very, accommodative. This is one thing which has been propagated by design by our private media and by the West. So we have to, take measures. There is no doubt that we suffer this issue, but it is being exaggerated also. So government must take some action in this regard, that people know the extent or the exact meaning of the religious norms.
Let me come back to you. I'm going to go to General Naeem Khalid Lodhi. Ji, Lodhi sahab, do you agree? You think in some sense it's exaggerated, which is what Brigadier Shahid is saying?
No, I think what all the three brothers are saying, that is correct. But I would like to comment on two aspects. One is the reason of terrorism, which grows out of extremism. And rightly said, extremism is a result of lack of education and also lack of justice. Let me emphasize on that. Social justice, political justice, economic justice. You know, this is also what we are saying is that the government's policies are also responsible. So it is not only that Afghan Taliban came to power in Afghanistan and therefore we are having this extremism. And of course, that is one factor. That is one factor. But other factors are that we are counting. And we need to do something about it. And one more comment which I would like to make, that is about geoeconomics being now, the focus, which is correct. It should be like that, because human security doesn't mean that physically securing them only. It also means that giving them education, giving them justice, giving them health. So this is because you must secure something which is worth securing. And we must add value to our own people. That is one thing. But at the same time, if somebody says that we can go for geoeconomics at the cost of geopolitics or geostrategy, I would not agree to that. Because without
can you explain this? Can you explain this a little bit?
Please let me complete my argument.
Ji, I'm saying please further explain it a little bit.
Right. So that is what I'm saying, that if geopolitics fails to create good relations with your neighbors and with other powers, you will not have good economics. And similarly, if your own strategic location, which can be a bridge, is used as an obstacle rather than a bridge, again you will have problems. So geoeconomy, geostrategy, geopolitics, they are intertwined and they go all together. So unnecessary emphasis. Geoeconomics has always been important. Since the man started its social activities, from the hunting and to wars and all that, every war, everything was directed towards mostly geoeconomics, resources, capture of resources, getting control over them. But this control only becomes possible if you are good in geopolitics and if you are good in geostrategy. They just focus on this and neglecting the other two will not work.
Right, which is, I think, Tughlaq Sahab, isn't it true that that's what the national security policy talks about? It essentially means integration of all these factors, which is Naeem Khalid Lodhi Sahab is also talking about the same thing. I mean, you can't view one in isolation of the other, which is principally the reason why the government has gone for this. Isn't it true?
Again, I would repeat that I have not read the national security policy. All that I have read in the newspapers is that it focuses on economy, which is a good thing. But until the government publishes a paper and tells us what exactly they have in mind, I cannot comment. But I'm sure their Their intentions are good. I am sure what Moeed Yusuf has said is in the right direction.
But in
And
terms of integration, that's what we're talking about. I'm not going into the nitty-gritties of what the national security
no, but
policy
you have to
actually.
go into the nitty-gritties. You see, you
Gee, we
cannot.
will when we get that.
when we get it.
But in the meantime,
it ought to be thoroughly debated in the parliament also.
Fair enough.
All senior voices must be heard. It should be a comprehensive policy, and it should not be, as the NSA has very correctively pointed out, it should not be military security only. You see, military security is only possible when there is people are happy. If people are not happy, people are up in arms, they are against the government, then you cannot. For instance, what happened in Gwadar recently, you see, people wanted that they should get rights. They wanted that there should be no illegal fishing in their waters. So if people are stealing their fish, then they will not stand with the government. So people should be satisfied. There should be enough for them to eat. If they don't get food to eat, then they will not support you. So when you have to fight a war, if you have to defend your country, everybody should be with you. So extremism, everything is linked with economics. You see, if your economy is not good, if your people are not happy, if the children don't go to school, if they don't get good jobs, then they will be upset. They will not be with the government. So these things have to be eliminated if you want to eliminate extremism. I'm talking about the country itself. About foreign policy emanates from the internal policies. If the internal policies are good, then your foreign policy would be good. If your foreign policy is good and your internal policies are weak, then you will not be having good foreign policy. So these are all interlinked and intertwined.
Right. Let me go to Sarfaraz Sahab. Sarfaraz Sahab, certainly we've agreed principally, I think everyone agrees that there has to be integration, which is, even if we don't go into the nitty-gritty of the national security policy, the point is that the integration is certainly something that the government has looked into, which is principally behind what they've done as far as linking it to the economy. Which is what we're talking about, generally speaking, which is what Soghl Sahab is also saying. He's saying that if people are not happy, they're not satisfied, they're not getting food, then of course it will breed intolerance generally. Nobody can deny that. But in your opinion, overall, in terms of where we are at this time, we're talking about education, which is also something that Brigadier Shahid Jagir also mentioned. He said lack of education, all of those things. But after a consistent decline, to see this kind of, the rise again, we attribute it, of course, to across the border situation also. But how do you perceive the future in terms of what's happening across the border and the effects, in your opinion? Of course, I'm asking you to speculate here on what's happening within the country.
Right. As General Lodhi mentioned about, having a good economy and also not deviating from the geopolitics and geostrategy. So he's very right, we need to strike a balance between the geoeconomics and geostrategy and geopolitics as well. But I think we have to reorient our policy, and we have to put our geoeconomics at our top priority. Because as Tughlaq Yamin Saab had mentioned that you cannot have a good defense without having a great economy. And because there is a large and massive population of Pakistan, the people of Pakistan.
But of course, and I know, and we all know how the challenges Pakistan is facing currently in terms of economy. And, the government is grappling with trying to make it as stable as possible, of course. But it is certainly, for whichever government is in place today, after 2 years, after 3 years, a long-term goal, or it seems like a long-term goal at this time, realistically speaking, for us to do great economy-wise, right?
Yes, you're right. As far as the education is concerned, that we have the NACTA, we have the National Action Plan, and we have now the new security policy is concerned. So definitely we have to integrate all those elements which are important for a safe and stable country in terms to defend your frontiers, especially the frontiers vis-a-vis Afghanistan is concerned. But the spillover effects we are going to, if there is instability in Afghanistan from theoretical perspective, definitely spillover effect Pakistan will be at receiving end if there is a trouble in Afghanistan. So in order to defend our frontiers, so we have to ensure that there are things in a proper order in our Pakistan, and people are not very upset with the state, because you see that how many graduates you are producing after every 6 months, and are you giving them enough jobs? So definitely there are TLP like organizations and many extremist organizations and many other outlets. So I mean, if there are many unemployed graduates sitting over there, so they will be easily exploited, and those organizations and extremist organization can use them for their own to pursue and to advance their own interest.
It's certainly going to breed more discontent, which can then of course make our youth more vulnerable to these extremist elements. There's no denying that. Ji, Brigadier Sahab, so what are some of the measures you feel should be taken immediately?
Sorry, come again. Your voice is not clear.
Brigadier
Kindly
Sahab,
repeat your question.
Ji, I'm saying overall, in terms of the measures you feel can be taken immediately, what do you think Pakistan can do immediately to counter any spillover effect and that can come as, from further destabilization if that happens in Afghanistan? Because certainly at this time we have seen some aid go out to Afghanistan. You know, of course we had the OIC conference here, some pledges were made there also, but we're not seeing the kind of reaction one would have liked from the West, for example. You know, the kind of the kind of help that perhaps Afghanistan needs at this time, regardless of whether, you know, Taliban, whatever Taliban do or not, the humanitarian crisis in place there at this time.
Look, Afghanistan is a man-made crisis. It's not a natural crisis. This mess has been created by the Europe and the US. They have made Afghanistan a firing range of testing of all the latest weapons made by their industrial complex for the last 40 years. And they still want that Afghanistan collapse, so their policy of over-the-horizon operation should be put to the test. At this stage, I would say it will be very inhuman on part of any country in the world which has some humanity to come forward and help the Afghan people. Its effect is going to be global. Absolutely, Pakistan, being its neighbor, is going to suffer the most, but the world is also going to suffer about it. Therefore, I would say that 9 billion plus amount, which is, you know, they are requesting, which is Afghanistan property, must be given to them. The UN should come forward and help out the Afghan people to resume their normal life. And especially the Islamic Ummah, as the OIC meeting has been there in Pakistan a couple of weeks back, but no concrete aid hopes have come other than Syria. So we need to help. Pakistan is helping in its capacity maximum. We have even allowed the wheat to be imported to Pakistan's route, despite our our relations with India. So anything which happens in Afghanistan, and if Afghanistan goes in turmoil, not only Pakistan will be affected, the Central Asian Republic will be affected, the Europe will be especially affected. So they have to see it from that perspective.
Right. General Lodhi, do you agree? You think that, of course, you know, I mean, there's no two opinions about what Brigadier Saab is saying in terms of what's happening in Afghanistan. But to counter itself, you know, I'm saying, of course, we are looking at the international community. We are hoping that there is a favorable reaction from them. We are also hoping that the Taliban yield on certain issues which have been made much of, as far as, you know, the rights of girl children to go to school, all of those things which the international community has really taken up, and, you know, they've really sort of narrowed down on those issues. And we were hoping, of course, that there would be some flexibility shown from the Taliban. That hasn't happened. Do you think there are chances that in a very near future we will see some sort of giveaway from either side?
I can't say in very near future, but I can just give my analysis that what Pakistan can do still in these, in this situation. The first of all, Pakistan must realize that which are the countries which will never come to the rescue of Afghans. And I would say, without any inhibitions, America is number one, that country which will never come to the rescue of Afghans. There are certain European allies like Germany and France where we have some hopes, and they have already released some aid also. But the main hope is, I think, China, Russia, Turkey, Pakistan, some Central Asian countries, and some such like countries. The rest of the world is just you can say on here, or they are sitting on the sidelines and fences, waiting that what is going to happen. So Pakistan should understand this thing, that going to America again and again, and UN is under their influence, and some other such areas. They should concentrate on China. They should talk to China. China and Russia should talk to each other, and the regional countries should make some plan for a temporary rescue of the people of Afghanistan. That is one where we should work. And the second is that whatever communication we have, I understand that Afghans do not listen to us, the way the world thinks. But whatever communication we have, we need to tell the interim Afghan setup that they need to show some flexibility. Because, all right, you may not agree to whatever Americans are demanding, but please also see what others are demanding. I mean, people around you. For example, if China is worried about ETIM, and Russia is worried about Uzbeks, and Iran is worried about Hazaras, about the welfare of Hazaras, and Pakistan is worried about TTP. And if they don't do anything about it, and they still want us to help them, that is great expectation. That won't happen. So I think Pakistan need to work on these two areas.
But do you think overall, considering the situation in Afghanistan at this time, and the fact that there is a dire need of funds, and of course the Taliban want an unfreezing of those funds. Do you think there's hope that there will be some yielding from there?
I think it will take time. In my own opinion, and I do not insist on that, the first initiative will have to be taken by countries that are interested in the stability of Afghanistan and in peace in Afghanistan. And definitely America is not one of them. So we need to know that which are the countries which really want this. So instead of looking at America again and again, that we are expecting those $9 billion to be released, and we are expecting the channels, the banking channels to get opened, that is not going to happen till, according to Americans' expectation, this present regime falls or collapses. So if Pakistan thinks that is a dangerous situation for us,
let me come back to you. Total Sab, do you agree? You think that, of course, America is a lost cause in terms of what General Lodi is saying, and of course we need to look at other countries where, even if they don't recognize Afghanistan, they can help Afghanistan, which is essentially what is needed at this time to prevent things really, getting worse and worse there.
Two useful takeaways from the Foreign Ministers' special conference of OIC on 16th of December last year were the establishment of two funds. One was the humanitarian fund, trust fund, the other was the food security fund. Now, I do not know how it can be operationalized. It is very important that, as General Lodi mentioned, that we should find like-minded countries. And I'm sure these countries would be countries around the regional countries, Turkey, Afghanistan, Iran, maybe Central Asian countries. China is a small border with Afghanistan. Russia is seriously concerned about peace and stability. So regional Muslim countries and even non-Muslim countries can bring about a mechanism in which these two funds can be made operational, and in the near term, some kind of aid is provided to Afghanistan. Then there are two other sources which can help Afghans. One is the Afghan diaspora, which has lots of money. Many of that money has come from the American pockets when they were sponsoring the Ashraf Ghani government and Hamid Karzai government. These people have taken their money to the Gulf countries and other countries, and they are very, very rich. So if they can be somehow convinced to bring back their money, that would be a good thing. I was reading in the papers that yesterday in the AICC meeting, the Afghanistan Inter-Ministerial Coordination Committee cell, there was a proposal that the Afghans willing to invest in Afghanistan should be given Pakistani nationality. The Prime Minister objected. He said, you cannot just make Afghan people a test case. If you want to give nationalities, give to other people also, good investors. Then another area which you can tap into is the Afghans living in Pakistan. Some of them are very rich. They are in the transport business. They can be convinced that, look, that is your country, you should invest in your country. And I have also met with Pakistani traders and investors who are willing to invest in Afghanistan, provided the Afghans government provides them certain kind of concessions. For example, they want to have a piece of land and property over there. So Taliban need to, the government, we have ministries who can talk to the Afghan government, look here.
The question, of course, will be how much leeway we have with them,
with the
and how much
Afghans. And I also saw a picture in which the Afghan National Bank of Pakistan in Kabul organized a conference in which they were trying to find out avenues and opportunities for investment in Afghanistan. So Afghanistan is not a lost cause, and for us, a single point agenda which the government is pursuing is peace and stability. Peace and stability cannot come without
the funds, without the money that has to
without
come
a good
from
economy. But we can do it if we want. So that is what I have to say.
Right. Ji, Sarfaraz Sahab, your comments. Unfortunately, we're running out of time.
Actually, you know, the security situation in Afghanistan is just, we should not see it in isolation, that if there is a problem in Afghanistan, that only Pakistan will suffer. Eventually, you know, the stakes of China, Russia, and some other countries are also involved. And we have a mechanism that, you know, Pakistan is a member of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and there is a particular mechanism, very, very important, RAT, Regional Anti-Terrorist Organization, and the motto and the ambition of Shanghai Cooperation Organization is basically to deal with three evils: separatism, terrorism, and extremism. So Pakistan should engage China and Russia and to convince them that, you know, it is a collective and common threat. I mean, if there is a problem in Afghanistan, so Afghanistan is an insulator state. So every single country located around Afghanistan will equally suffer. So and one important thing that Pakistan must convince Taliban government as well, that you know, Pakistan must convince them that if they want to survive, so there is no solution outside the inclusive government. They should engage the other stakeholders in power sharing formula as well, like Tajiks and Uzbeks and Northern Alliance. So.
Overall, I mean, before we close, don't you think overall, as far as our foreign policy is concerned, our, of course, support of the Afghan cause, our trying to convince them of inclusiveness, which, you know, of course, we have been under pressure from the world, so to speak, thinking, you know, how much leeway we have with the Afghans, and we've also, you know, categorically said that it really isn't that much anymore. Instead of anything else, we've been the sufferers from you know, on our foreign policy side.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right that, you know, Pakistan is one of those very few countries who had basically suffered just because of this crisis and the tragedy, and Pakistan is continue to suffer even. So Pakistan is one of those countries which take this cause very seriously, and OIC
is proof of that, of course, the way
yes, and also the other countries I've mentioned earlier, and China's stake are very, very high because of the Belt and Road Initiative in China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. So Pakistan and China also have, I think, allocated some of the funds to stabilize the Taliban government.
They have. Thank you so much for being with us. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Toghril Yameen Saab, thank you for joining us. Sarfaraz Ahmed Rana, thank you for being with us. Brigadier Retired Shahid Jagir Saab, thank you for joining us. Lieutenant General Naeem Khalid Lodi, thank you for being with us today. As far as security is concerned, of course, Pakistan faces numerous challenges on that front also. religious extremism, all of those things. But of course, we're very resilient. We realize Afghanistan will have its spillover effect. But Pakistan government, of course, we're working consistently on a foreign policy, on trying to convince the Afghans from across the border, on inclusive government, on making sure that security itself and its challenges are integrated with economy. All of those moves are garnered towards making the country more stable economically, but also towards dealing with these security challenges. Let's hope that the government can do all those things, and we can move towards more stability and of course curb these extremist elements, so to speak. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.